Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Empowered Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Monos. Today, we have a special guest, Thomas Flores. Thomas is a strength coach. He's worked in the college setting, and now he's working in the private sector. Thomas, if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick introduction, what is your athletic background, and how did you get into strength training?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks, Matt, for having me on. We've had a lot of Instagram conversations going back and forth, so it's nice to, finally get to talk to you. But yeah, you said athletic background. So grew up in a small town, California, like really played everything: football, basketball, and baseball. I played in high school. Again, it was a small town, so it wasn't really anything too crazy competitive. But yeah, that was good. It was just a lot of playing in the backyard with my brothers, playing sports any chance I could. From there, I played baseball in junior college. And when I say that, it was pretty scarce. Like I redshirted my first year, and then I ended up not finishing through my second season there. But that was where I started to realize, it didn't hit me soon enough though, but I started to realize how behind I was on the physical aspect, right? And not being big enough, not being strong enough. I think I was a pretty good baseball player, so to speak, at least at that level, but it was never, I was someone who, like, ironically, which is probably different from most strength coaches, I didn't like the weight room when I was an athlete. It was always something that I knew I needed, but always ended up being like, one of those things that I just was super sore, and I'd go and take grounders or, hit off the tee, and it just felt horrible. So I was like, oh, this isn't helping me. Obviously, different structures, but program or, just sticking with it longer probably could have helped me. But yeah, I played baseball in junior college. That was kind of where it ended. From there, I just got my bachelor's degree in exercise physiology. Then originally wanted to do physical therapy, but made the switch to strength and conditioning. And that was when, like I mentioned to you before, like I moved to Colorado for University of Northern Colorado, school up like say hour north of Denver. And that was where I was a graduate assistant at that school. And that was where I kind of, really just dove in everything strength and conditioning. And then from there, after first year, we had a full-time coach leave. And then that was where I got hired on full-time. Stayed there for about 2 years, working with a variety of sports. I mean, I'm sure we'll get more into it later, but worked with a lot of sports there. And that was where I ended up getting into the University of Texas and got the job there, working with cheer, women's golf. Originally, I was there with cross country. Then we moved some teams around, and I ended up helping with diving. And then there's a brief little stint where I had track and field as well, just because we had some coaches leaving and stuff. But yeah, that's the extent of it, really.
And then now you're at Landau Performance?
Correct. Yeah. That's the next step after that. Yep. Landau Performance back in Colorado. Yep.
That's awesome. So I want to go back to the start, actually. I think it's interesting to say that you didn't like the weight room and all that stuff. I liked lifting, but I didn't like lifting heavy. I think it's a very normal thing that you kind of have like a natural build and tendency, and then you like the things that you like. You don't like things you don't like, but I think it's more genetic than it is personality traits sometimes. And so I've had this conversation with other strength coaches on the podcast, but there's like the soft side and the hard side of training. So like soft side might be like your rhythm, your balance, your mobility, stuff like that. Hard side might be like the more meathead stuff. So like lifting really heavy, getting a crazy pump and all that. And you might find that one dude like super strong in the gym that doesn't move very well on the field. The other guy that like, you see this myth a lot with like boxing, where I say you shouldn't lift weights because then you'll get too tense and you won't be able to throw loose punches. And you can do both, of course, but it really just falls into like the balance, of course, like you're talking about good structured programs and stuff. When I was athletic, I was more of a soft side type of person. So getting into like a heavy bar was like poison to me. Like I hated it. But that was actually one of the things that could have benefited me. Instead, I would do a lot of like crazy volume stuff when I already had good endurance, but I really could have benefited from adding force to be a powerful athlete, right? And so I think it's interesting that you say that. It's a hard lesson that people have to learn, but I find that most strength coaches tend to be more the opposite end, where they love the weight room and all that stuff, and maybe they could have benefited from more skills practice or being a little bit less tense, being a little bit more flowy, for lack of better words. So if anyone's listening, the lesson is do a little bit of like an audit on yourself and your natural abilities, and then see what area is missing. If you are someone who can squat 500 pounds, but you can't turn, you can't touch your toes, maybe going to 505 won't be the difference maker in your game and your performance. And then vice versa, if you can do the splits, but you can't bench 100 pounds. And again, there's other things to work on. So I think that's definitely interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so there's kind of the same thing. Like you said, it's not that I didn't like pushing myself. Shoot, if I could go and run, like I was always the first in line when we were doing whatever conditioning for whatever sport, finishing first, because I like that aspect of pushing myself. But it was, like you said, getting under a heavy bar was just something that was like, I'd my body. Well, really, it's like I'm more, even when you kind of see me move now, I feel more just like fluid as an athlete, and I was just kind of drawn to that stuff. But yeah, nothing in the weight room was ever, something that I really enjoyed doing, at least at that time.
Yeah, and so like I think you would have learned, and I learned the same thing, that it's like there still is value to it, right? You don't have to make it your entire life, but it's definitely something that can help improve your performance. And so
Uh,
that's something I like to communicate. So whatever athlete I work with or adult, because I work with a lot of Gen Pop, it's kind of like what buckets are you filling? What are pretty full? What's missing? And I like to use the bucket filling analogy. And then the main four buckets that I like explain to people with session structure are just the main way that I categorize things is like mobility, speed and power, strength and conditioning. And so if like you're really strong, but you can't express that force quickly, you're not going to be very powerful. So we got to focus more on speed and power, for example. With my, one of my clients, for example, is very strong, but he can't touch his toes and he gets winded sometimes pretty easily. And it's like, well, if we focus more on mobility and strength, we used to do 45 or 50 minutes out of the hour together, strength. I'm like, dude, you're good on strength. Like, let's just do maybe 30 minutes, just dose it, maintain it. If you want to make a little bit of gain, that's fine. But like, we should spend a little bit more time on the other stuff and your quality of life might improve substantially. So when it comes to program, I think sometimes people in our field, especially, get confused because they're like, how should I do it? Should I do it based off the sport? Should I, whatever. And it's like, well, look at the guy in front of you. What, or lady, of course, what does that person need? Right. I think athlete specific has always been more important than sport specific. And I'm sure that'd be an interesting thing to talk to you about because you've worked with so many different sports. There's obviously nuance where cheer might need to focus on some aspect more than golf and golf more than cheer, but within those teams, you're not going to train them all identically.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's another thing to kind of go into too is like a lot of times we're good at the things we enjoy doing is usually things we kind of like to do, right? Or the things we enjoy doing are the things that we are probably better at, like naturally, right? Like I like going on runs and, like I said, I was in front of the conditioning, so I was just more of an aerobic type athlete. But again, just because we're enjoying it, that means we got to hit that other end as well and try and make sure we're getting better of improving our weaknesses. In terms of like coaching, I think it's helped me really just connect with athletes because like I think a lot of people, I mean, we kind of mentioned it, a lot of strength coaches are usually the type that are, hard nosed in the weight room and I like it. And I mean, shoot, I like that now, right? I like pushing myself and challenging myself with heavier weights. But, the athletes have a perspective of like, oh, well, they like this. They like the strength work. They like, whatever it is we're having them do. But when I let the athletes know, like, yeah, like when I was an athlete, I hated it too. Or like, oh man, I used to hate this exercise as well. Or, you're right. Like, once you get over 8 reps, that does suck, right? Kind of just having that connection to them is, usually something that I've been able to connect with athletes a little bit more with, like, you said working with a variety of different sports. So like to bring cheer up, since you mentioned them, it's a lot of, especially at the school I was at when I was doing it, they were split up into different groups in terms of like, there's an all girl squad, there's a co-ed squad, and then there's the POM or the like the dance squad. So they all three are doing totally different things. Even within each squad, they're doing totally different things. A lot of them as well, and a lot of them could be coming in at the same time. So I just kind of got to find the balance of one. Immediately, most of them didn't have any sort of strength work already. So anything that I throw at them is going to be beneficial, right? They are going to get stronger. And then the other is finding the balance of, okay, a lot of the guys in that on that team were already very strong and they already enjoyed the weight room. Ironically, yeah, they were just already very strong athletes. So it was finding the battle of like, okay, this is how we are training for performance, right? We're not just training to, failure every single set, things like that. So it's all that happening at one time in the weight room was probably the most difficult thing to balance. Other than that, I just looked at their sport as I would any other one. Just look at the movements that they did, whether they did them a lot, whether they hardly did them at all. Positions they were put in, same thing, whether they were in them a lot or not putting them at all. How can I get them stronger in those positions? And then how can I get them in and out of those positions safely? That was probably the biggest thing of how I kind of broke down their training.
I think what's interesting too is with cheer specifically, is I think of it as such an explosive sport. And then I also think of it as like mobility is very important. Stability, especially if, so I don't know if these terms are correct, but like I think there's like the throwers and the flyers or whatever. And if you're a flyer, then like you got to have great stability, you have to have great mobility, the positions they're putting themselves in. And then like you're talking about the guys, they might be lifting someone overhead with one arm. I think people underestimate the sheer athleticism that goes into sports like that. I would bucket that as like, I think dance, gymnastics, cheer are all kind of in that same bucket of like, what is the body physically capable of? Kind of pushing those, but it comes across more performance than what some people would consider to be true competition, which is like at any moment, one person can score, the other person can score. So like basketball, boxing, whatever, or at least there's like a very objective way to get your score as opposed to performance arts might be a little bit more subjective in that sense. But I
Yeah.
think that people think it's artsy, it's not athletic. And like, if you ever see a video of a male ballerina, which I think the correct term is ballerina, fun fact,
Okay.
crazy legs, crazy flexibility, the spins. I mean, there's really cool stuff they can do.
Yeah, and every time I'd go to their practice, like I always told them this too. I'm like so impressed. All the squads, I'm so impressed about like what they did, even if they were just dancers. Like I
Uh-huh.
got no rhythm when I dance, so watching them do their thing was like obviously impressive. But yeah, then just all the tumbling that they do, like you said, the flyers, the bases. To kind
Mhm.
of talk a little bit more about like those positions too, since you brought it up, like they're pretty similar. Like I gave them all the same program
Mhm.
except for the guys. And then there's a part of the year where I took the dancers the palm on a different one and kind of I basically just took down the intensity for them with different exercises. But again, they most of them had lower training age, so like they were still I just couldn't gas them out the whole year, right? And I thought about it in an aspect of like I need to do this training to where I could get them stronger, keep them healthy, but they are also competing very constantly in turn, like it's game days multiple times a week for them. And then at practices, especially during football season, at least how it was done at the university I worked at, they had a big roster. So people had to try out every week to be on the field for game days. So it was a battle of like, okay, I got to make sure I'm building them, getting them stronger, but like, it's almost like you know, in my head how I thought about it was like basketball in season, right? Or like probably more NBA compared to college, I would imagine. But because there's games throughout the week at different times of the week, every other day, right? That was kind of the same thought process for them is like, okay, they're going to have things all throughout that I got to be able to account for to make sure they could still perform their best. Because if I end up doing something that, hurts them or makes them feel not right, like how I said, I was always sore and hated taking grounders. If I did something that made them super sore and they didn't feel like they could, do their spins or any of their tumbling or stunting at the highest level, like it's gonna just lessen the buy-in for them. So I had to kind of find that balance. But the like overall like aspect of it is because they were, they do different things. But if I was just looking at like stability overhead for all of them, whether they are tumbling or stunting, right? The bases that are holding at the bottom and core stability, right? Got to be able to stay braced. If you are holding someone overhead, you can't get in too much of an extended position. And it's ironic too, like talking to coaches, they were like, yeah, that's something that, that person struggles because she like overextends her back at the bottom. I'm like, oh, like just like a shoulder press, just like a snatch, like when we do different things, like some things are going to mess us up. But anyway, where I was going with that is I was able to find a good rhythm for that. They were all able to do the same exercises, but
Mhm.
it was like, okay, for, the palm dancers, like power cleans, I'm not going to be too picky about how their power clean weight increases, right? Like I want everybody to be doing the same thing, but let's just get them flipping the bar and they feel comfortable, get them more confident in the weight room, right? And then for, a base or even a flyer, I want to see those numbers go up. I want to see them get stronger because that is constantly what they're doing in their
Mhm.
sport, right? Overcoming inertia, rapid triple extension, body self organizes and catches himself. That's the same as like a back tuck, a backflip, right? So that was my thought process as I went through. I kind of kept them on a similar program and just made sure like, okay, I need you to be good at this. I need you to be good at that. And then we kind of just go from there.
So what you're saying brought a smile to my face because it's super interesting that I was saying I recorded a podcast episode yesterday with a friend who's also a strength coach and a physical therapist, and we're talking about how everybody likes to go niche, right? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's this model to like basically say I work with just these people and I'm the best at working with these people. You get the diehard fans and all that, and word of mouth, whatever. But I also think like generalizing is such a powerful thing because then you can see how the dots connect amongst all movement, all sports, whatever. And you see the differences as well, and that adds a little bit of nuance. And I think training is cool because I think almost any exercise, any program can work as long as you can justify
Mm-hmm.
the thought process behind it, the reason behind it. So when you're talking about power cleans and self-organizing underneath the bar on the catch, saying that you might with a human body, it's like that's a
Mm-hmm.
super fun justification for me. And that's the
Yeah.
thing too. The body doesn't distinguish between catching in one sport versus another or something like that, which I think is cool. I mean, you see it too in like rugby, for example, when they lift people up to, catch the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty darn similar to what someone's going to be doing if they're lifting them up for like cheerleading or something. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. I like those
Yeah,
justifications. The other
exactly.
too is based off what you're saying with the really busy schedule. Corey Schlesinger was at the school maybe at the same time that you were, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he
Well,
was there before. He left before I got there, but yeah.
but so he was like within our space, pretty famous for microdosing. And I don't know if he's the father of it or he's just the guy that brought it back. But like, I like to think that, famous phrase is necessity is the mother of innovation. And I imagine with such a busy schedule, microdosing kind of had to happen. And so if you have people that both compete, but then they're also doing like, I don't know, they're doing like halftime shows or something like that. And it's basically game day several times a week, like you're saying. It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
just say, okay, 2, 3 times a week we have an hour and I just get to crush these guys and not think twice about it. I think you have to be, very conscientious of all the fluctuations based on their schedule. Is that one of the main things that you had to adjust to with your sports?
Yeah, definitely. because that's probably the biggest thing in college is like you're kind of building it around their schedule and their sport, really in any aspect, right? Whether you're training somebody, Gen Pop client, like you got to build their program so they could do stuff in everyday life. If you have an athlete, you're trying to build their program so they could do stuff in their sport and beyond that, hopefully. But so that was my same thought process. I just got to kind of, manage those stresses as best I can. And I didn't have the time or the bandwidth. Like it would have been like really for all team sports and even myself, like if I could just do like some sort of microdosing like 6 days a week, like that's probably the most ideal thing. I'd gotten to do that once with one athlete back at Northern Colorado back in the day, which was, awesome. But that's probably the ideal situation for most athletes, I would say. For the cheer team, in that sense, I wasn't really able to. It was just that with their schedules and everything, we can only get 2 days a week. But again, I would take that same approach of like, okay, well, you guys are coming in Friday, Red River Rivalries tomorrow. Like everybody's going to that one, or at least most of the team goes to that one. Yeah, we're just going to hit the first block today or the first two blocks today. Then if you want to stretch and roll out, you could do that. If you want to add this block, yeah, you can. Just do whatever makes you feel good. And, sometimes things like that, it was a good way of them, continuing to get buy-in. Because then, like I said, like some of them, they could have probably got more out of doing less. Some of them were probably needed a little more, and they ended up doing it. Your body kind of naturally feels, what it's supposed to do. What it like. You're usually that feeling you have of like doing more, doing less is probably some sort of sign, right? As a coach, we're the ones that tell you to do it or not, but as an athlete, you probably feel that.
So autonomy is such a powerful word. People talk about buy-in all the time, and it's just sometimes thrown around so cheaply that it basically means like nothing, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, what does buy-in mean? Does it mean that I let XYZ happen? I let the kids pick the music for a workout or something like this. Like that's a
Mm-hmm.
strategy, but it's not buy-in in and of itself. I think to have conversations with people, to like understand them, to get to know them, to like share with them, like you're talking about how you also don't like the weight room and like connect with them on a personal level. I think it's maybe the most important thing is like it might sound simplistic, but actually just giving a damn about these kids, I think
Mm-hmm.
will probably be the biggest mover for buy-in, or any client, not treating them like a number on a piece of paper, and you just got to prove that their numbers went up so that you're a good coach.
Exactly.
I think that's great. And then autonomy is just such a great way to like to achieve a goal. I think like when you involve somebody, you go a lot further than when you just tell them what to do and try to, I don't know, scream at them, blow a whistle, that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to bash the strength coaches that do that because like that's the common thing you hear about like the college football weight room, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
a totally different culture, environment, setup, lots of different. So I get that, but
Oh
maybe
yeah.
for like golf or cheer or cross country, like you're saying, you can maybe it's a small roster and more, maybe it's just a different personality type where you can have that approach and that's more beneficial, more successful.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I mean, yeah, that's spot on. Just being able to talk to them with cheer, there's a lot of them. So, like, just knowing their name, I think they took a lot too, because there's over 100 on the roster. So, that was one thing I even told the coach. I was like, I'm going to learn all of their names. She was like,
Awesome.
oh, okay. But yeah, that was something I was able to do. And once I did it the first semester, like, it was easy after that. Every once in a while, I'd mix them up or I'd need a reminder. But yeah, and then same thing with like even my other teams, like cross country and golf. And then when I had diving as well, like those teams are a little smaller, a little more intimate in the level of like how they work together.
Mhm.
Because they're constantly doing like very similar things, or if they are doing different things, it's at least within the same area, and it's just a lot closer of a team, I think. But yeah, so with those, it was kind of just small things, like you said, just giving them autonomy, getting to know them. I like playing golf myself. So with the golfers, I was just like, I would just ask them questions about like, oh, like, what are you thinking on this type of shot? Or what do you like to use when you're this far away? Just like small questions like that, just to kind of, again, just kind of create that buy-in. But yeah, it was definitely fun working over there.
So when you said that you like to golf, that doesn't surprise me. This is like a stereotype, of course, but a lot of baseball players when they're done with their baseball career go to golf
Hmm.
because rotational swinging, right? So that kind of like aligns there. And I find that that's such a fun thing too, because if you rotational athletes, if you want to categorize overhead athletes, rotational athletes, whatever, rotational athletes, if you got powerful rotation, which is a skill that a lot of people use but don't train, I guess, unless you're one of
Hmm.
those, as long as you can like hit the ball dead on, you might
Hmm.
slice 9 out of 10. If you catch it clean that one time and you got that power, that thing sails. And that's why
Yeah.
I think it's in the conversation between like the neurological and physiological side of things and then just like pure skill, right? Because you might be like 150 pounds and bench press 100 pounds and all that stuff and hit a golf ball cleaner than anyone ever. And you might have that 250-pound baseball player that just like hits a bomb, when he finally catches it clean. So
Hmm.
I'm curious if that's something that you use to help get buy-in with your golfers. or when you did work with the golfers, they just say like, hey, like it doesn't hurt to be super strong and super jacked and super fast, and then still hit a
Yeah.
ball with super technique.
Yeah. And that was something I would tell them a lot. Like we would track and monitor a good amount of data that we would have and sort of challenge them so they could hopefully improve or, whatever. But every time I would remind them that in all of the things that we were doing, I was like, I will beat you on the force plates. I will beat you on the kite to air squats, right? My numbers will be higher. I was like, but we'll go out and play and you will beat me 10 out of 10 times, right? You guys are better golfers than me. I was like, however, and it's exactly like what you just said, when there will be a time in that match where I do hit the ball farther than you, or I could reach a green sooner than you because I am stronger. I have that capacity to do so. So since you guys already have that skill, you guys are already good at what you do in golf, right? They're at a pretty great university to be able to play and do that. Now let's try and just increase that performance a little bit, right? Just increase the strength a little bit, and just be able to help them continue to grow. Golf is like it was easy to get their buy-in. Golf is, and just performance in general in golf is growing a lot, I think. And then it's similar in baseball too. That numbers are just huge right now. So like they have, club head speed, velocity, exit velocity, all that stuff that they track. So those are things that they've probably been tracking since like high school. When they come into college and like what we're doing, we do other, like I said, other tests that we continuously go. They're trying to improve those as well because they understand like this number goes higher. Like I should be able to make this other number higher as well, right? The one that on their course where they actually have. So I think that was probably something that helped me get buy-in with the coach. She was like big on being able to track stuff and seeing improvement, but also like, just helping them see themselves improve. And then I wouldn't try and ask for it. I try not to be like, oh, is your drives going further? Are you trying to like, I tried to hopefully let that happen naturally. And for the most part, I would hear that from most of them is that like, okay, they're hitting the ball further. Like, perfect. That's all I care about. It doesn't matter. Like, if their rear foot elevated split squat numbers went up, like they do need to go, they need to be able to translate to performance. And then on that as well, it's like, okay, are they winning? Are they, finishing strong? Is their first drive the same as their last drive? Like things like that. I'm like, okay, are they able to, perform best at their sport? Because that's obviously the most important thing. And then another thing I'll add too with buy-in, because I just thought of it, is the a big thing with I've been lucky with all sports I've been able to work with that like if the coach is bought into like what you do in the weight room, like that makes my job so much easier, especially in the college setting, right? Like if their head coach is like, she would want text every single time like they finished of like, hey, how they're doing, like what's going on, who pushed themselves, things like that. And when a coach shows interest and shows that she thinks like what we do in the weight room is valuable, and that's just going to help them, be more bought in as well. It just makes my job so much easier.
It's definitely a conversation I'd like to have, but I wanted to go back real quick. I want to talk about like how you work with all the different departments essentially in
Mhm.
regards to the athletes, so the sport coaches, also maybe the physios, all that stuff. But going back a little bit, talking about like golf strength, I work with a lot of golfers, but they're middle aged. I hope they don't get offended by me saying that if they listen to this. Truth hurts, right? They're in a country club members and all that stuff, and so they all say like, "What is something I can do that's like golf specific?" And I tell them like, "I don't think anything is actually golf specific. Rotation's rotation. If you do a cable rotation, is it baseball specific or golf specific? It's just rotation, right? Whereas like if you can improve your rotation, if you can improve all these different things, I'm sure it might like translate when you actually have the skill aspect because you're just giving yourself a better engine to use, right?
Mhm.
But you're the driver, you still have to be a talented driver, right? So I like to use that analogy or like hardware, software, whatever. But I think people kind of forget sometimes that it's like you get plenty of stimulus from the sport itself. I don't think we need to do med ball throws for an hour if you're just going to go to the driving range and rip as hard as you possibly can for an hour. And
Mhm.
then go, 2 rounds after that. Do you know what I mean? Like that is a ton of rotation already. I don't feel I need to, but as we're talking about buy-in, I can't give a golfer a program that doesn't have 3 sets of 5 med ball throws, or 2 sets of
Yeah.
5 or three, whatever, just so that they think, okay, I'm getting a golf program. He sees me. I'm
Mhm.
curious if that was something that ever played into your mind when you're right.
Yeah, definitely. Being at when I was working at Texas, actually, so someone else, the coach for men's golf, was the one that was because there's like a transition period, right? She was covering the women's golf team while I was coming in. That was something she like initially told me right away was, when I showed her my program and we were kind of just talking over it, was like, okay, we'll be cautious about how much med ball throws they're doing and like what is the intent of like when you're doing it because they are going to be swinging a lot, right? They're at the they're practicing all the time and playing all the time and year round. So it's like, okay, do I want to actually do these mid ball throws to is that going to drive anything in performance or is it just going to make them worse or like make them more tired or just add to the overuse that they're already doing, right? Because in terms of, practicing for golf, it's probably needed, maybe. In terms of rotating, just thinking about the like anatomy or biomechanics itself, just rotating that much, probably not beneficial, right? So do I want to add those med ball throws? So that was something I had to kind of sit back and be like, okay, do like golfers need to do med ball throws? Like, wait, what do we? And I actually kept out of my program for a long time because of that same reason. I was like, okay, well, they're going to be swinging and doing that at practice, and I would tell them that, like, well, make sure you're getting the most out of practice then. If you are, if you feel like that's something you need. Here, I was like, I want to touch on the things that we aren't getting on the course. So we would do rotational things, but it would be more of like a slowed and controlled motion, like a cable rotation and on alternate the stances, cable chops,
Hmm.
things like that, to where, again, they are getting that rotation, but I'm not just like they're learning how to control, rotate, and then rotate back and staying under control as they do it, as opposed to just, hurting their back, hopefully not. But yeah, so I kind of kept that out a lot. What I ended up doing later was putting them in for med ball throws because they would ask, kind of like you mentioned, like they were asking, like, well, why don't we do med ball throws? Like, can we do med ball throws? So I put them in, and I was just strategic about when we're doing them, what days we're doing them. They just came off a tournament. I'm like, hey, we're skipping these today. Or if I knew they had, some time off where they weren't going to be playing, or, some of them were traveling for another tournament while some were still in town. It's like, okay, hey, let's let some med balls fly today because we aren't going to be, we have the time to. But when they got towards the end of the season, I didn't just scratch them and take them out, right? They feel like they're working. So I didn't want to just erase them. What I
Hmm.
started to do was just add some like constraints. So basically, it's like, okay, well, now you got to step first before you throw. So hopefully now they're, they probably could get higher outputs in the end, but now the focus is more loading the back foot, extending through
Hmm.
the back hip. And now maybe it slows them down on the first couple reps, the last couple reps, they probably get high outputs on them, but overall, it slows it down a little bit, takes the pressure off their back, hopefully too. And
Hmm.
then or other things of where you have to step forward twice and then go, or you start facing the wall, then you got to step into it, right? Different things that's kind of just challenging their overall movement bandwidth, right? It's still giving them the stimulus mentally of like, I'm throwing this med ball, it's helping for golf. But again, it's not going to hopefully put them in a position that's going to lead to any overuse things that they are, already going to be fighting with the whole season.
It's a fun point too, talking about like constraints to do the same thing in different ways. And I like
Mm,
just like if I'm doing a program, I like to do same but different phase to phase so that they're still making progress. So I won't just do like a squat one phase and then deadlift the other phase and then they're not doing the same thing. It might be like you squat and deadlift both phases, but maybe it's like a pause squat and maybe it's like a deficit deadlift or something. Just change the variables one thing at a time. It could be tempo, load, intent, whatever, right?
exactly.
But then, like, I think too, that's an opportunity to get movement variability. And that's something that people talk about is like specificity, variability, whatever. And it's like, I think the warm up is one of the best times to
Mm,
introduce that. People can, if they, a lot of people are like, oh, should I do barefoot training and get the 5 fingered shoes? And I'm like, no, if you're barefoot in the warm ups and you do a little bit of like crawling and rolling and dipping and stuff like
yeah.
that, that's fine. And that's where you can also like play the little games and introduce people to new movements. But same thing, like you're saying, like add a constraint can almost gamify it too. Sometimes it's playful for people to try new variations and
Mm,
feel locked and then to unlock it is cool. I think it's particularly interesting though, because golf is maybe one of the least chaotic sports. I don't say that as an insult, just as like a matter of fact. The ball is always going to
yeah.
be where it is when you hit it, as opposed to baseball, for example, where, if someone throws a ball, it looks like it's going down the middle and it can fly at your head at the last second. So
Yeah.
I find that to be an interesting
Mm,
thing. Not that it's not justified. And
yeah.
sometimes it's actually necessary to keep people healthy or just make them a better mover in general, is give them
Mm.
what they're in, right? If they're always super controlled, then maybe a little bit of chaos is something that can be beneficial for them.
Yeah, exactly. And it was always enjoyable for me to see them have a moment of like, oh, this like sucks and it's pretty difficult and like I don't know if I could figure this out, to where and then by the end of it or a couple weeks, right, they figure it out and they're actually enjoying it and having fun with
Hmm.
themselves. That was something I, really enjoyed, again, which is having those little and adding those little constraints.
Hmm. And so what's
Yeah.
interesting too is like golfers think I need rotational throws. And then you
Mm,
have swimmers saying I need pullovers and a dumbbell
mm,
pullovers or cable pull downs or something like straight on pull downs. And then you have, like every sport thinks like I need this one specific move. It's like you're doing that all the time. In fact, that's maybe the
yeah.
movement the least, which I think
Mm,
is really interesting. It's hard to have that conversation without losing the athlete in terms of buy-in. So it's like that's where you just have to have a little bit of common sense. Like, what if I just like sneak it in? They think I'm listening, but I'm not doing so
mm,
much to really add an insane stimulus that would be like damaging or anything like that.
yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's definitely a fun thing. And it's interesting how every sport has that one thing they feel like they must do. So like
Mm,
over the past year or two, I started combat sports, a little bit of Muay Thai and like jujitsu. And
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu guys think they need to like do towel pull-ups, because that helps with like gi grips, like holding
Good
on to
grip.
sleeves. And it's like, that's cool. And they can be challenging and all that. And every now and then I'll mix it in, but I'll just do it as like a grip challenge or for fun. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not just fun as it's like beneficial for sport performance because it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to have something as chaotic as when I'm gripping someone's gi and they have two arms on my one arm and they're trying to thrash it off. Like, I'm not going to
Uh,
try to do that in the gym, that's kind of crazy. And that's also where people forget that the sport is such a huge stimulus. That's why people are so beat up when they finish games or tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the same thing. Like, there's some things where I feel like if you are able to give, like you mentioned baseball, and I used to work with baseball as well. And I like med ball throws for baseball players, whether it's a, position player or a pitcher. They have a lot of, now it's probably a little bit different for pitchers, but they have a lot of like not max intent swings as they go through, right? It's pretty precise. They aren't swinging out of their shoes every single time. So sometimes for me, like a med ball is like, okay, well, let's get that max intent throw that we could do. Same thing on the other end of that of like, okay, maybe some golfers, they always have just a max intent. Like I work with men's golf when I was first at Northern Colorado. Every time they swung there, most of them, every time they're swung, they're trying to be like Bryson DeChambeau off the tee, right? Hit the ball as hard as they can. So I started giving them like, okay, try and hit that spot on the wall every single time. And then it was the same thing. Like, okay, well now they got to control it a little bit. If it misses, like then it's gonna, I didn't give them any sort of, I guess, penalty for missing. But I was like, oh no, let's hit this same spot on the wall every single time. And it kind of could teach them to be a little more like precise of their rotation now, just kind of
So
hitting on that other end of it.
constraints is one of the best teaching tools because I think it just forces people to see things from a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just stuck in their own viewpoint forever. One of my favorite kind of examples of that as a soccer player was Gareth Bale. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was at one point the most
Mm-hmm.
expensive player in the world. And he's very fast and he's very left footed. And so he would just like kick and run past people all the time. And one of the things that his like PE coach in school taught him to do was he's like, all right, well, you're killing everybody and no one wants to play with you. So how can we make it more challenging for you, but you also develop in the meantime? So he said you can only use your right foot or you can only play with two touches. If it's two
Mm-hmm.
touches, dribble past people all the time. So it made
Yeah.
him like passing and moving, or if it's right foot only, that made him a two-footed player. But when he
Yeah.
takes it into the professional game, for example, now he has twice as many options because he can dribble a pass or he can go on his left foot or his right foot. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of the best ways to give people opportunities to learn and grow is not by just saying, hey, do this, do this, do this. You
Mm-hmm.
give opportunities, basically, don't do this. Now what are you going
Yeah.
to do? This
Yeah.
a
How
fun
do you
way to.
figure it out? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
I was going to ask social media. I wanted to compliment your social media. I think you do a good job of
Oh, appreciate it.
making the posts that people should make as opposed to the posts that we see a lot of people in our field make. In our field, and
Uh,
I'm certainly guilty about this, sometimes I'll just like post something that only other trainers would understand or appreciate, and I'm not making it for the populations I actually work with. And then like I
mm,
make videos where you like explain pogos, for example, and maybe another strength coach would be like, "Why would I teach about pogos? They're so basic, it's boring." Whatever. And it's like you do it, but that's the questions that people that you actually work with may have. So can you speak to that?
yeah. So, yeah, that's something how I've always understood like strength and conditioning. I've always just tried to like how my brain works. I have to like simplify it to the most simple level, right? To be able to understand it and to be able to apply it. Don't think like when I first heard for the pogos, for example, right? Like, and staying dorsiflex when you jump, I didn't think about like utilizing stretch shortening cycle and, all that stuff. I just thought about it as like, oh, if the foot is here and you go like this and then jump up, that's probably going to be slower than if you just hit the ground like that. You know what I mean? So I simplified in my head as simple as possible to one, be able to explain to myself, like, so I understand and be able to explain to the athlete. And I think that is where also a lot of coaches get caught in the weeds of like, oh, well, I don't really understand this subject or I don't understand, why they're doing it this way. Like, what's the best exercise for, this athlete? Things like that. It's like there's just so much information out there, right? Like I know for myself when I was scrolling through social media, it's like so much of like there are people going into so much detail about very, very specific things. And it was like, oh, where like how do I use this? So that's kind of my approach to when I am, trying to explain things like that on social media. It's one, like maybe it's an issue that like I've seen athletes do. Maybe it's something that, when I was at Texas, I worked with the interns there and an intern would come ask me like, oh, why do you teach it like that, things like that. That's always what I kind of used my social media for. Or I'm sorry, what I used, like how I got into social media was like, I'm just going to explain, what this one person had a question about, or, this
Uh-huh.
athlete had a question about, and then, explain in a simple way possible that maybe a young athlete who doesn't know what to do for training could get something out of. Maybe a young coach who's new and trying to process all this information, they could get some benefit from it. And then also maybe an experienced coach could be like, oh, okay, like I never broke it down to that level before, and that makes sense. Right. So I tried to kind of just touch all those bandwidth while also not getting out of my lane of like, knowing the very, very nuanced specific physiology or things like that. Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that too is like even if you use those big terms, if someone doesn't understand it or they don't care about it, then it's just a waste of time. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah.
the explaining XYZ to an athlete with CTE kind of trend, but it's someone who does like a
Mm,
presentation and it's like why do we
yeah.
do tricks and it's like jumpy, good, and like they explain
Yeah.
like the most
Yeah.
like possible. I actually think that's like in theory a constraint that actually would make you better at explaining things. And I think it's an Einstein quote. It's like if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. I
Hmm.
think I've had college professors in math. And it's like, why don't you get it? And I'm like, because you're explaining on your level and I'm here and you're not bridging the gap. So,
Yeah.
like, what is it? Michael Scott from The Office was like, explain to me like I'm 10. He's like, okay, explain to me like I'm 5. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. I've heard that. I've heard that too, actually, of where someone just talked about like the best people to learn from are the ones that like aren't far removed from your situation, right? Like I think so. Like I still feel like from my last internship, shoot, that was in 2022. So I'm, is it 2026? Yeah. So I'm like 4 years, really just 4 years removed from my last intern. Well, 2021. Sorry, 5 years removed from my last internship. So I feel like I could still kind of resonate with where those coaches are at of like, I'm not going to over explain it like this coach who has all the years of experience, you know?
well, then some people do it a little bit too much and they talk about 90-degree eccentric isometrics all the time, which is,
Hmm.
yeah, but anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask you as well. This is one of my favorite questions. What is like a major thing that you changed your mind on during your career and why?
It's something I've been trying to think about a lot, honestly, recently. I think I honestly constantly change my mind a lot. Sometimes it's within a session, sometimes it's right after a session, or a couple weeks into one. I had this thought that, I thought it was kind of funny. It was like, are you like familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
people who, know a little think they actually know everything, but then the people who actually learn more about it realize they know nothing. I learned that like very young into my strength and conditioning career. Like I was lucky to follow some like smart coaches and learn from smart coaches who would kind of like remind me of things like that. Like, hey, like, you don't know that much, or if you're ever in a position where you feel like you know everything, you probably don't. So I was very aware and like thinking like, oh, okay, I don't know everything. I don't know everything. Like, so in my head, I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to affect me. I'm not going
Mhm.
to fall into that trap. But then I look back at some things like I used to say, maybe to athletes or to other coaches or just rationale behind some of my program. I'm like, I don't need to over explain it that much. Or like, what was I thinking? Like, I really didn't know anything at
Mhm.
that time, even though in my head, I was like, oh, like, this is the right thing to say because, and I'm not being too specific or whatever. And I look back and I'm like, dang, I have no idea why I did that or why I thought that way. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably I'm trying to think of something maybe more specific of what I changed my mind on. I would say I'm not very, in terms of my programming, I
Mhm.
used to want to try and fit my programming into like a specific method and kind of be like, oh, like, because people would talk about like, oh, their conjugate or whatever other training method that they would do is like, this is how we always do things. And I would try and kind of fit that into my program as well. It's like, oh, like I would learn something about vertical integration. I'd be like, oh, like vertical integration is like something I do. High-low model. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do a high-low model too, right? And if anything, probably high-low model is probably most to what I am now. But I don't try and classify my programs into one
Mhm.
of those things. I just like if someone asks me my particular like training method is just I train athletes like athletes. So then I, analyze their sport and get them, look at what qualities they need to get better at, and then I help them improve those qualities. It's no particular like method. So that's something I'd probably say I changed my mind on the most is thinking that I needed to fit into a particular training method when in fact like it's not my own, right? I'm taking it from other people, but it's kind of my own and I'm just trying to fit it to the athlete.
So I think that's interesting because that's, I think, just a normal thing that a strength coach will go through early in his career. He's like, oh man, this is best because I read this one book and
Hmm.
it specified in this one book. So this is best. And then you start to like reject the other things, but then that's actually really dangerous because then you get kind of culty with it. And then you
Yeah.
miss like the big, beautiful world of training where like maybe something in another context is superior. And so if you just
Hmm.
like almost doubt not like doubt yourself by having zero confidence because then no one will trust the things that you say, but like enough to like question yourself, right? Then you can learn a lot just
Yeah.
by doing. And so my personality type, I used to think like I used to stay up at night, like all night if I couldn't like decipher something in my mind. Even in like high school, it was really weird. I'd be like, this doesn't make sense to me. I have to think about it till I can rationalize it. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm gonna go to sleep. I'll sleep on it. Maybe I'll wake up, I'll have an answer, maybe I don't. And like just letting go was almost one of the most like liberating things. The same thing is like if someone asked me to say what's my style, almost having no style. I know it sounds kind of Bruce Lee, kind of philosophical at this point, is better in the sense that it's like I'll just do whatever the situation demands, as opposed to saying this is who I am, and maybe this works really well in this instance and works terribly in another instance. And I don't know, there's just something beneficial in my opinion about not needing to have all the answers, being open minded, being able to like learn and consider things from different perspectives. And I think that again, like I was saying, everyone wants to be niche, but I think being general in that sense is a very beneficial thing because you can connect the dots and work with more people in that sense. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it hit me when I was like working more with like interns and we would go over different like training methods and I would get a question of like, oh, like, well, what is like mine and how do you do it? And I'll try and like explain it like it was one. And then I would go and they would see my program and they'd be like, oh, well, like, is this part of, that, undulating periodization that you do? And I'm like, oh, well, I guess this part isn't part of that undulating periodization, right? Like I kind of caught myself like, well, damn, I veer off of this a lot. Like, should I really say that I am sticking to this whatever training method? Because that's the biggest thing. Like you said, you got to be able to meet the athlete where they're at, and then adjust to where you're trying to get them to be.
Which is why I think some of the arguments in like our space can be kind of stupid because some people say like everybody should back squat. Some people say nobody should back squat. And I had like a client who, not a client, sorry, a guest on the podcast. And she's saying like my hot take is I don't back squat my athletes. And she's like, it's totally a fine exercise. I don't prioritize it. She's like, I'd rather have the squattiest squat and the hingiest hinge. And if I need a hybrid, I do trap bar deadlift for outputs. So I'll make people do like heels elevated front squats and RDLs. And then we can do like a trap bar deadlift. And she's like, most of them prefer it. We can still do heavy split squats if we want to get when I'm like, that's fine. You justified it. We're good, And somebody else is like, nah, you got to get underneath the bar. I'm like, maybe, maybe not. But like, that's just how I feel about training in general is, there are plenty of ways to skin a cat. I don't know if that term is outdated yet. That phrase is outdated yet. I'm not advocating for skinning cats, but yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do things. So as long as your athletes are, healthy and performing well and they're bought in and all that stuff, I really don't care what you use. And same thing, whether it's exercise or implement. If you watch, two people in sports and they're both sprinting as fast as each other and jumping as high as each other, do you think the, parents or coaches on the sideline are like, man, I wonder what their split squat is versus their deadlift or anything? Just going to ask you based off what you're talking about with like, trying to justify things and changing your mind on things. Do you ever look back at an old program? And of course, you probably look and be like, man, why did I do that? But do you also have times where there's almost like a forgotten exercise or method that you used to use that you really loved and you almost like bring back into your rotation?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Happens a lot, honestly, if I like look back at whether it's old video or like something I do myself in my training or yeah, something I did in the past. It's kind of just a reminder of like, yeah, like that was something that like worked, but definitely more of doing things and looking back and being like, what was I thinking or like, why was I trying to, run this kind of program or doing this particular exercise?
Mhm.
Something where, and it was kind of what we were just talking about before too, is like, you had that coach on about back squats and not wanting them to do back squats. I had a very rigid, and I think coaches have talked about this a while. And again, this was something that I thought I was more aware of when I was early on. But
Mhm.
when I worked with soccer at Northern Colorado, women's soccer team, I had a very strict like regimen of like progressing squatting, right? Like goblet squat, front squat, into back squat or whatever it was. And I was very specific on keeping the freshmen, when I had the freshmen come in, staying on a front squat,
Mhm.
throughout the season because they're freshmen and they need to continue front squatting. And I would all the time get, requests of like from them of like, oh, I don't like this. Like, can I do something else? Like, why do we got to do it? And I was really had no good explanation besides like, oh, well, freshmen stay on this program, right? As I look back now, I'm like, why did I try and get so, why was I so strict about trying to like give up that autonomy, right? Like I could have just been like, oh yeah, like, oh, you want a back squat? Okay. Or like, oh, you know what? And now's not a good time to switch that up, right? Like this is the week of, where we got a rivalry or we play Thursday, Saturday. So it's going to be a quick turnaround, not time to switch up lifts. So I was like, next week we don't have a Thursday game. Like, cool, we could switch it up then. Whatever it was, like, I probably could have been a lot more lenient with that. For some reason, I was like, no, you have to stay on this, very strict thing. And that was the same thing too with just soccer athletes in general, like sticking on that point of like, what I changed my mind on. I definitely tried to do too much. We had 2 days of training. Sometimes it would be less depending on travel. And I would always try and fit in the most I could within that when I probably could have got more use and more buy-in if I just shrank their program and gave them exercises they liked doing, because I had to have a, squat, hinge, push, pull, single, like I had to have include all those things when I probably could have just took a step back and been like, oh, like, they probably could get away with just 3 blocks instead of the usual 5 that I do or whatever it was.
I had a guest on the podcast who was saying that sometimes the best thing you can do for your program is cut as opposed to add. And
Hmm.
like sometimes we want to achieve so many things that it's almost better to just like audit it and then prioritize it and then slash the
Yeah.
trash, good stuff, like get rid of the junk volume is
Hmm.
like terms that he uses quite a bit. But like a quote that I like to say is, you can't ride two horses with one ass. No, I think that's not like a perfect quote when it comes to training, is because you can work for multiple qualities at the same time, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea is just that, like, does the person have to divvy it up so it has to be even for every quality, or can they prioritize qualities over the other? And then if there's
Hmm.
some, that's again the bucket filling thing. If all your buckets are equally full, then maybe fill them at the same pace.
Yeah.
But if you're really good in one area and really weak in others, or maybe you're tapped out because you're getting too much of a stimulus from sport or something like that, like you're not
Hmm.
going to soccer players do a bunch of suicides in the middle of their season or in postseason or something
Hmm.
like that, because that's just, in my opinion, dangerous and negligent. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that's a definitely a good take is, yeah, being more flexible and not force people to do things they want to do too.
Hmm.
One of the things I learned about that is I'm private sector, so like people don't like the workouts, I don't make money. So you got to
Yeah.
give them what they want, even if you think it's like suboptimal. And I've completely rejected the term optimal at this point now.
Yeah.
It's like saying functional doesn't mean anything at this point. But you give them what they like. An 80% like effective program done consistently with enthusiasm will yield better results than a 100% perfect program that they don't want to do. So that was a big lesson for me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because all I did was create an environment of where like now they come in and I just have to tell them what to do. And anytime we had something optional or some, whatever it was, like they would be like, ah, well, Thomas is gonna probably make us do something that, I hate doing, so let's not go. Yeah.
So another question I was going to ask you was, do you have any hot takes in the industry or just strength training in general?
Honestly, no. I saw this. I don't think I do. Maybe I do. But I saw this post today that was like talking about how a bunch of people say they have like a hot take and then they end up just saying something that like majority of people agree with. Yeah. Yeah. Like strength isn't the only important metric. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, we understand. But I don't know. Like I don't think there's really much that I could say is that like too, profound. Something I've been kind of thinking on recently, I guess, is and this goes to when you asked me about social media is like I explaining things like simply. I think, sometimes we get caught up in like, oh, things that's probably not a like oversimplifications aren't like good, which I get to a point, right? Because it's some people, it gets taken out of context with some people being like, thinking of example. Have you just seen that the batter or the banana thing with someone and Mel Robin and they're like talking about how this banana has like this one particular whatever in it and it cancels
Yeah,
out the good stuff with the blueberries. You know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah, yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, I heard people saying, oh, yeah, just terrible advice. And like, don't have bananas and blah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and something like that, like and that's like the misinformation that people think that is like a oversimplification of don't have bananas. But I think sometimes the simplification of things is like really good, and it's okay to just understand that, like, back squats could help me get stronger for my sport, and like that's all the understanding that you have. Then there's the nuance of like, okay, well, like, how are you repping it? How are you, dosing it? When are you doing it? Are you doing it the day before game day, day after? Like, when is that actually better? But I guess it's okay for people just to understand the simplistic explanation of things.
I think that's a good way to phrase it. Essentially, is like simplistic doesn't mean absolute, right? So it doesn't
Hmm.
mean a simple phrase could be back squats good, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, like maybe not for everybody in all contexts. So then that's where nuance comes into play. But if you
Yeah,
can, arrive at the correct conclusion with the nuance and then explain it simply, I think it's more a strategy than like a being overreaching sort of thing. That like you don't have to say something simple and then it applies to everybody. You just say what applies correctly to that one person in a simple way. I think that's a good way to look.
exactly.
Mhm. I
Hmm.
think I don't even know if this is a hot take, But I think that like strength coaches, sometimes it's called strength and conditioning is often neglected.
Hmm.
It's almost like you never hear strength and conditioning coaches are called strength coaches. You never hear them refer to themselves as conditioning coaches. You know, it's like there's
Yeah.
always that bias, right? But then the other thing
Hmm.
too, I think if you're working with athletes, it's beneficial to also be playing a sport, even if it's rec, even if it's co-ed, just something to keep the body moving and engaged and stay with it a little bit. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do it. I just think maybe it's something that people can do almost for professional development. Is I took a few years off of like when I graduated playing, graduated college soccer, I went straight into coaching and I played, you know, like Sunday league for a year or two. And then when I started my business, I didn't have time to do any of that stuff. So I probably had a 2 year
Yeah.
gap. It's actually beneficial to play, co-ed sports or, start training, combat sports or something like that again. I think that's been good for me to, to still be with it in that sense. But then I also think about that too, that, there's a old Italian soccer coach, Arrigo Sacchi, who had a quote back then. It was believed that if you're a great player, you'd be a great coach, and he was never a great
Hmm.
player. And they're saying like, how can you be a good coach? And he's like, do horse trainers first need to be horses? And
Yeah.
I think I don't want to oversimplify it again in that sense where it's like, oh, if you didn't play the sport, then you're not going to be good coaching that sport because I'm sure you've never done cheer, and you could have done a
Yeah.
great job coaching them with cheer. So
Hmm.
I guess it's not a hot take, but I just think do a bit more conditioning, play a bit more sports.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. That's kind of funny too, because people also, when they shorten it, they do say strength coaches. They don't,
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
shorten it any other way but strength coaches. But yeah, no, I'd agree with that as well. And I think, I think sometimes having that different perspective actually helps, being able to think about, like for me, being able to think about cheer as an outsider probably helped me as opposed to being in too much of the nuance of it. And then, maybe getting too specific in the sense of like exercises,
Mhm.
maybe could have been a bad thing.
Yeah, it plays both ways. People say that like sometimes the great athletes don't make great coaches because it's like imagine you're being coached by Michael Jordan. He's like, why don't you just dribble three people and like hit a deep three
Yeah.
or something? It's like because I can't, like
Hmm.
do
Yeah.
that. But, yeah, so I think it's funny.
Yeah.
I have two more questions that I want to ask you. There's some of my favorite questions. This one might be my favorite question. What feels like a touchdown in your job? Like what gives you the greatest sense of achievement or purpose?
Yeah, probably the best thing what feels like a touchdown is I just love seeing my athletes succeed.
Mm.
That's always been the best thing. Like I kind of wanted like I had personal goals and aspirations in terms of like in my jobs, but what always has the promotions and the new jobs like obviously I felt good, but what I truly enjoy seeing is my athletes out there doing what they love to do, and and when they're good at it too, that helps a little bit. But yeah, it's like when I worked with softball at Northern Colorado when they've won their conference championships, like just seeing them celebrate on the field, like, brought a lot of happiness to me. When I worked with, working at Texas, we had a golfer win national champion, like seeing her celebrate and like do her interview after the game, like, or after the match was like, it's just awesome to see because you see the work they put in and you see all the little stuff behind the scenes. And like a lot of times the stuff we do in the weight room isn't what they like love doing. Right. So then when you see them actually doing what they love and then succeeding at it, that's what probably feels the best. And when I get to know these athletes I work with and like, that's all I want to do is like now, like, being here for a short term, like worked with a small amount of athletes here so far, but I can't wait to see them play.
What I like is that, like, a lot of people will say, and of course, I'm sure this matters to you, but like making connections, this, that, the other. And then a lot of people kind of, it seems popular to say winning isn't everything. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
nothing either. Because, like, why do we keep score then? Why do we have these people work so damn hard to better themselves if winning doesn't matter at all? So I just feel like people have
Hmm.
gone way too far with that, where it's like winning is everything. Okay, it's not everything. If you get second
Yeah.
place, it doesn't mean you're a loser and you're a failure and all that stuff. But winning's pretty cool, you know? So I
Yeah.
think there's,
Yeah, and it's not the only measure of success. Sometimes it's, somebody wanted to, be all conference and they were able to get all conference. They didn't get, the national championship. Someone, wanted to be ranked in the top 10 and they were able to get there. Someone wanted to, make a game day roster or start, like things like that. Like there's other measures of like what that winning, really is. And that's what I love seeing as well.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
The last question is kind of a vague one, but if you could give any piece of advice to literally anybody, it doesn't have to be related specifically to like athletes or strength and conditioning or anything like that. What would that one piece of advice be?
One piece of advice to anybody, I would say to make sure you do things that you enjoy doing. I think that's probably oversimplification. But, I think as you get away from the sport you played or, just out of college in general or out of high school, whatever, I think you kind of start to veer off. Like you feel like during those times, it's when you're supposed to like have fun. And then like after college, it's just work or whatever. I think you should still seek those, opportunities and things that you enjoy. So like for me, like I am, I do my best to make sure that I still go out and play sports when I can or train myself. I enjoy coaching, so that helps. Or, spending time with my girlfriend and watching documentaries that she likes, like, things like that, that I need to make sure I make that time and things that I actually enjoy doing. Don't just, feel like, oh, well, my, athletic career is over or this part of my life is over. So that's like done. Like continue to go out and, pursue those things.
Of that advice because I feel like a lot of people are into like this hustle culture thing. It's like, let me be more miserable than the next person. It's like, you can
Hmm.
get by a bus tomorrow and then that's it. And so if you said, I'm going to be happy when I'm 65 and I'm retired, that's when I'll be happy. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, you're wasting, let's say you're 25 right now, you're wasting 40 years of happiness just on like bargaining with yourself when you'll be happy or under these certain constraints. And you might get to that point and then that actually wasn't the thing that made you happy in the first place. And,
Hmm.
you know, time for us at least is linear. We can't go back. So you got to make the most of like
Yeah.
the life you're in right now. So I appreciate that. And then I also heard a quote somewhat recently that I love, which is people say that like success is the key to happiness, but I think happiness is the key to success. If you
Yeah.
love the thing you're doing, you'll do it more, you'll be better at it, as
Hmm.
opposed to like, let's say you hate something, you're just forcing yourself to do it over and over and over again. Like, sure, you might like, sometimes they say that an actor wins an Oscar and they think they can be happy. And it's like, it wasn't what I thought it would be, and then they're
Hmm.
left, if this can't make me happy, nothing made me happy before, then what do I have? So I
Yeah.
definitely, this stage advice.
Yeah, yeah, you can't get what's it called? Destination disease. You can't get destination disease
Okay,
thinking
cool.
like yeah, I'm gonna get to that point and it's gonna be, that's it, then I made it. Because then you're either gonna get there and it's not what you expect, or you're gonna get there and like you said, still feel this need to have something else. And it's probably
Mhm.
because there's these other, avenues in your life where you probably weren't seeking happiness.
Smelling the roses is important because I found what happens too when someone actually does achieve is they either live in the past or then they're like almost like, yeah, there's that book Relentless where they talk about, all right, I did this,
Yeah.
done next, done next, done next. And I'm like, that's cool. But also like, it's kind of a disease in that sense. That's like greed to an extent. If you can't celebrate the victory, even for a little bit and look back and enjoy everything
Hmm.
and sacrifice and all that stuff. So,
Yeah. No,
when
I
people say
agree.
play hard, I think that's a good
Mm.
metaphor, as long as you're not doing it like Dennis Rodman, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, one of my favorite player is favorite basketball player is Steph Curry, and he had I've heard him like he's probably someone who's pretty good. He seems like he's pretty sound between the ears. Obviously, I don't know him personally, but like he has a good awareness of like how to stay driven and things like that. He's someone who I've heard him even explain it like through golf and why he likes golf is that like there's always like something like you finish a round and there's always something there like yeah that was good like it was my best round but there was that one putt right there was that one drive there's those things where you could continuously like push and get better at. So that's why why he enjoys golf. That's part of the reason why I enjoy coaching as well. But then he had a quote too. I think they lost. It was when they lost the finals, maybe to the Cavs a few years ago. Shoot, a while ago now. But they like asked him after like how do you like deal with this? And he's like, well, like basketball is just one part of my life. He's like, I find happiness in plenty of other things besides basketball. He's like, I'm upset, like I wanted to win, but there's other things out here that he has a family and other things that he does enjoy doing. Yeah, to me that like kind of resonates with me because it's like okay, yeah, I do enjoy my job. I do want my athletes to be successful, but I don't hang my hat on if it was a successful season or um, other things happen. Right, like there's like cool, like okay, this sucks, but there is other aspects to where I could still be happy and in the end, I guess be successful.
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
If you want to plug yourself, I want to thank you for your time. If you want to plug yourself, your social media, anything that you might be up to, please do that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, social media. It's just Instagram. It's probably the best way to
Mhm.
get in contact with me. Just T Flores underscore two. I mean, I'm working out in Denver, Colorado now. So if everyone's local, feel free to reach out. And same thing online. Like if there's any coaches or athletes or anyone that's listening that just wants to connect with me, send me a DM, and I'd love to chat.
I suggest that as well. I don't even remember how we first got in contact, but I've really appreciated the back and forth that we've had. And
Yeah,
this has been a really fun conversation. I appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. It was good talking to you too. And I got to shout out Steve White, Coach White. He was
Okay.
I think Yeah, I saw him. I think I saw him on your podcast, which is when I first got to,
Yeah,
you
Steve
know,
the man.
contact with you. Yeah, yeah, cool dude. And yeah, we met a couple years back, pretty briefly, and then stayed in touch through social media. But
Where
yeah,
would you then?
what was that?
Where did you meet him?
The Coach 'em Up conference.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Okay, so that's where
Yeah.
like my connections are from now. Is like
Oh, really?
Steve, Deshaun, Tyler, like all other people that have been on my podcast have all been like
Okay.
people that coach me. That was, I think I've only had FOMO like once in my life, and it's because I wanted to go there, but my family, there's like a family wedding that
Uh,
was around, so I just went to the family wedding once. So not that I
yeah.
made the right choice, but also
Yeah.
I got to see everybody posting like the workouts and like the new shoes, and I was just like,
Uh,
and like I should be there right
yeah.
now. That's
That was the
cool.
first year. I'm guessing the first year they had it. I
Yeah,
mean,
first aid and
yeah. Yeah, that was me this last time because I couldn't go this last time because it was my friend's bachelor party. Same thing. I was like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not gonna miss this. And then I saw everything that people posting. I'm like, man, that looked like a good time. Yeah, Steve and I literally, it's kind of a funny story. We literally parked at the same time and we're walking into the elevator at the same time the first day. And I was just like, oh, cool. Like, so we just chatted that day. The next day we came around and pulled up at the exact same time, went up the elevator at the same time. So it was just, yeah, it's kind of funny.
yeah, awesome. Well, man, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Of course. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah.
Chat soon.